What is up, you guys? I'm PJ, and I thought I'd start a music channel. I've always wanted to get into some form of content creation, and I guess I finally got serious about it. I know a lot of things about a lot of stuff, and I thought doing a channel on all things music was the avenue I most wanted to do. I watch plenty of music YouTube channels, and while I've spent plenty of hours listening to those videos, there's inevitably going to be topics that you want to hear about, and hopefully you guys here want to hear about, that don't get discussed. So if no one else wants to bring it up, why not make the content yourself? So I thought this video would be a little introduction about myself, what type of music I'm into, and the direction I'm going to go with this channel. Growing up, I didn't really listen to a lot of the popular music that was going on at the time. It's the strangest thing. Like, if you meet an 85-year-old, you'll just assume that they're an Elvis fan because his popularity was at its zenith when they were teenagers. The first real thing I remember listening to was probably when I was 5, 6 years old. This being the peak of the CD era, and my dad bought the Beatles' Red album. That's their compilation album that features all their Beatlemania era stuff, and maybe even the beginnings of their more experimental material. The only time I was really interested in contemporary pop music was around 1999, 2000. I got into the boy bands because everybody else was listening to it, and that's just how it was, I guess. So when things really changed for me is probably the summer between 7th and 8th grade. The boy bands had already vanished, and some of the newer stuff being played on the radio, so this would be Maroon 5, the Black Eyed Peas. None of that was really... I mean, there might have been a few songs of theirs that I liked, but it wasn't connecting with me. So I was going over the CDs I had, figuring out what I liked, and trying to see what I should be listening to. I was, in a sense, going full circle because I'd always known about the Beatles, and I decided to take inventory of all the Beatles CDs that we had and see if there's more stuff to collect. There's a website that's still around, it's called Rock on the Net, that showed their entire discography where I could determine what albums we already had and what albums we didn't. So, over the course of 8th and 9th grade, I went about collecting all the other Beatles CDs that I didn't have. And I didn't have a job, so that it was something to get, that I'd get for my birthday, or stuff I'd buy with allowance money. I pretty much exhausted their catalog, and it's not like I burned out on them, but it came to a point where you've already listened to all their songs, and there's obviously more than just the Beatles to listen to. So this is getting to around 2006, and it's a very strange period in hindsight. You had the beginning of streaming like iTunes, and you could download music to burn onto a CD, but I never knew how to do either. YouTube was extremely new, and the idea that it would be a venue for music was still something people hadn't figured out yet. They were still selling CDs at this point, but I didn't want to buy a CD from an artist and not knowing what the other tracks besides the one I want to hear are. It's not so much that I would say this is a strange time, but it's a period of flux. Everything's in flux. So I'm trying to figure out how I can branch out and start listening to other stuff. So I start listening to the radio. I mean, there's nothing more simple than that. The random nature of the songs being played was something I liked, vis-a-vis the certainty of a CD. It's almost like a slot machine. So I decided to listen to the local oldie station, and I thought I'd find more good stuff like the Beatles and, talk about culture shock. It's all well and good to say that the Beatles were not as much of a rock band as Blue Oyster Cult or Kiss. And keep in mind, I'd never heard of those two bands at the time. And it's all very well and good if they're fans of, Kiss or Blue Oyster Cult didn't like the Beatles. Nonetheless, the Beatles were serious rock music. And what I was hearing on the Oldies channel, and they're playing stuff like Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, Tracy by the Cufflinks, Lightning Strikes by Lou Christie. They, and by they I mean the Beatles, they had more in common with any hard rock or metal group than the dreck I was hearing on the radio. So obviously I'm saying to myself, what the fuck is this shit? Listening to this slop on the radio convinced me that as much as I may have exhausted the Beatles catalog, this is what I'm kind of stuck with. I mean, they are, when all is said and done, the end-all and be-all of music because none of this other shit on the radio comes anywhere close. Now, obviously, it showed my lack of imagination because, to me, I thought there were only two channels, current music and oldies. Maybe a country channel, which I never really had any interest in. And it was only years later that I discovered that there was a classic rock channel. And if I had discovered it then, it could have sped up my musical odyssey. Fast forwarding a little, I get this system called Sirius XM for my 18th birthday. And that was a huge change because I was looking for more serious rock music to listen to. There was a station called Classic Vinyl, and it was almost like what I had expected oldies radio to be, is what I was getting with this. I'm discovering all this new material like I'd Love to Change the World by 10 Years After, I've Got a Line on You by Spirit, or Melissa by the Allman Brothers, and it's off to the races, if you will. You just keep finding more stuff to explore. But while Sirius was a good step in the right direction, the real change was me being out of the house and having more access to YouTube and being able to go down the rabbit hole of curiosity. So this is 2009, 2010. So while you still couldn't find an entire album online, it was a step in that direction. And this is important because, as I said, I'm cheap and I didn't want to buy a CD from an artist, because how did I know if the song of theirs I liked, or from whoever I wanted to buy a CD from, was the only good song that was on a disc? So I'm branching out and getting into different stuff. So originally it was just the stuff I'd hear on Classic Vinyl on Sirius, but then I'd branch out into more soft rock stuff like Paul Davis, Air Supply, Ambrosia, and then also into grunge, some of the hair bands, and new wave, even getting into more contemporary acts. My brother was into the hipster and indie type groups, and he got me into this one group that pioneered a kind of ambient sound. I think they were called Real Estate. And he also introduced me, and this is around the time they did Lonerism, to Tame Impala, who, out of all the contemporary bands out there, although it's really just one guy, they'd be my favorite. So once I get into something, I really want to know everything about it and develop an almost Rain Man level of knowledge, such as the names of all the band members, knowing the names of all the famous guitar players, as well as the types of guitars like Epiphone, Gibson, Fender, etc. More recently, the thing I've gotten into is the history of popular music. History was my favorite subject in school as a kid, and I even majored in it at university. So I started applying my interest in history, as well as my interest in statistics and data points, to my interest in music. I started going to the RIA website, which, for those who don't know, it's the Recording Industry of America. They're the agency that would calculate sales and certify an album gold or platinum. So any single or album that's been certified gold, platinum, multi-platinum, whatever, is listed on the website. So it's a real treasure trove of information. I even bought a book a few years back that covers the pre-Billboard era. It's written by a guy named Edward Foote Gardner. It's like an encyclopedia of all the popular songs in America from 1900 to 1949. And most of that time was before Billboard, because Billboard didn't start releasing charts until about 1940. So I've also become interested in how the mediums through which the music has been distributed and, the business models have changed. I mean, you go from sheet music and then to a combination of radio plugs and record sales, and obviously those are just singles like 78 RPM and then 45s. And then you go to the singles plus albums model, where like before it was just albums are cover songs that don't get any radio play, and they're sort of a cash grab by the record labels. But then probably by the 70s, you have hit singles appearing on albums, and the singles are fueling the album sales rather than there being a wall of separation between them. And there's also the shift from releasing a half dozen singles a year to releasing an album on a biannual basis by like the 80s. I don't know the reason why he waited so long, but I think Michael Jackson, for example, waited almost 5 years after Thriller to release Bad, and that would have been unheard of just a few decades earlier. The biggest change, or at least the one in my lifetime, has been the shift away from physical copies to streaming. And the point of all this, me bringing this up, is to say that because the medium has changed, it's difficult to track things. It's an uneven terrain. Bohemian Rhapsody, last I checked, was 2.5 billion streams? Obviously there's some songs that have more than that. I think Blinding Lights by The Weeknd has 5 billion. But in some ways, it's an unfair metric, because if Spotify existed in the mid-70s, Bohemian Rhapsody almost certainly would have more streams. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Some future videos might be regarding the stylistic aspect of things, like what makes this song sound this way, or what caused this shift in sound, or how sound X evolved into sound Y. I might do a few historical videos, but whatever it is, it'll be topics that haven't been broached on the big YouTube channels, or maybe a unique spin on topics already discussed. I've commented on blogs for years, and the real thing you take away is the comment section is what really makes it what it is because of the community that it forms. And obviously on the super huge YouTube channels, it's less common for the creator to reply to the comments, but that's definitely going to be something I'll do. And I'm humble enough to realize that as much as I know, there's a lot I don't. So don't be afraid to come up with suggestions for new videos or requests. Maybe you can all teach me something. So yeah, I guess this will be my first video. Talk to you guys later.